NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick, man, he is ticking off lots of people for his decision not to stand during the National Anthem. Now he is getting some support from an unlikely group. Veterans yesterday on social media, hashtag Vets for Kaepernick, begin to trend all across the country as various veterans begin to say they did not fight in order for Colin Kaepernick not to have the right to protest. It has been a tumultuous few days for the NFL star because of his decision in the preseason games not to stand up during the National Anthem. He's been criticized by former players, saying it is a disgrace to the military to not salute the flag. But now all of a sudden, all over social media, vets, African Americans, whites, and others are rising to his defense. Here's some of the tweets. I'll show them for you right now, folks. Here's one vet, veterans for Kaepernick, because I didn't volunteer to defend a country where police brutality is swept under the rug. Another one, I serve to protect your freedoms, not a song. Hashtag Vets for Kaepernick. I don't agree with all his points, but I'll fight to the death for his right to say it. Hashtag Vets for Kaepernick. But also, yesterday, Rodney Harrison made some controversial comments about Colin Kaepernick on a sports talk station in Houston. Check this out.
I'll tell you this, I'm a black man, and, Colin Kaepernick, he's not black, okay? He cannot understand what I face and what other young black men and black people face, or people of color face on an every single basis when you walk in the grocery store, when you walk in, and you might have $2,000 or $3,000 in your pocket, and you go up into a Foot Locker and they're looking at you like you're about to steal something. Maybe I don't think he faces those type of things that we face on a daily basis. If he really wants to make change, maybe what he needs to do is maybe, write a check out of that $11 million salary that he's making and maybe, donate it toward a cause or something like that for people that are fighting for injustices against people of color. That's how you make change, and I'm not just saying just writing a check, but just sitting against the National Anthem. You're offending a lot of people that sacrificed and died, man, basically for the freedoms that we have right now. I'm not saying that he has to be black, but I'm saying, I said his heart is in the right place, but even with what he's doing, he still doesn't understand the injustices that we face as a black man or people of color. That's what I'm saying.
Harrison sounding pretty ignorant there. Here's the reality. Colin Kaepernick's birth mother is white. His birth father is black. Okay? He was adopted by a family, white family, after his mother gave him up for adoption. So the reality is he is a biracial man, just like President Barack Obama. Harrison's criticism set off a Twitter firestorm, igniting responses from tons of critics, including ESPN host Sage Steele. She tweeted, "People like you claim us biracial kids when it's convenient for you. That's a racist double standard. Sad." Well, Harrison has now apologized, going to social media saying he made his assumptions. "I never intended to offend anyone. I was trying to speak about my experiences as an African American. I apologize to anyone that I offended. Wasn't meant to be hurtful to anyone. God bless." Last point I want people to know, I never even knew he was mixed. I should not have called Colin Kaepernick's race into question during this morning's radio interview. It was a mistake, and I apologize. Well, thank goodness. Let's get right to it with our panel there in D.C. I'm here in New York. Dr. Jason Johnson, political editor for TheRoot.com. Eugene Craig III, vice chair of the Maryland Republican Party. Lauren Victoria Burke, political analyst and writer for NBC Black. A. Scott Bolden, partner at Reed Smith LLC. All right, folks, look, here's the deal. Okay? Rodney Harrison sounded utterly ignorant. At what point are we going to stop this notion that if you are biracial, oh my God, you somehow don't know the black experience? When Colin Kaepernick, when he gave his interview on Sunday, he talked about having cops called on him and they coming into apartment, guns blazing. Plus this notion that somehow you got to grow up in the hood and you got to have some hard life from a single mother that somehow defines one's blackness.
Yeah, well, Roland, it's just sheer ignorance, one. But two, remember this, what does race have to do with your First Amendment or your
Actually,
right to protest?
Scott, hold on 1 second. We got a problem with your microphone. I want to get that fixed. Jason Johnson.
Okay. Yeah, so first off, I think Rodney Harrison may be suffering from CTE, which is can't tell someone's ethnicity, okay? Because I don't see how he can look at Colin Kaepernick and not understand that he's a black man. But here's the other thing. I am so tired of the sports media asking Rodney Harrison, asking some of these linemen, why don't they ask James Blake? You know, the tennis player who got tackled in front of the Waldorf Astoria? Why don't they ask Thabo Cephalosha, who had his leg broken by the police officers and had a season-ending injury? So if we're going to have this conversation, why don't they talk to the other professional athletes who can speak to it the same way that Colin Kaepernick do? But we know they're not asking that question because it's all about attacking a black man who took a stand on an issue that's important to black people.
And Lauren, how about talking to the African-American players, NFL players, basketball players who there's a history of being accosted, handcuffed in South Beach and other places as well. I mean, Rick Riley wrote about this years ago for Sports Illustrated.
Yeah, well, obviously the sports press is no different than the regular press when it comes to avoiding issues such as this. Obviously, you know, the real, quote, crime that Colin Kaepernick committed is not the sitting down, it's that he's standing up for African Americans. Anytime you stand up for African Americans, that's a huge issue that people cannot really look in the eye of, because it forces everybody to talk about police brutality, and it forces everybody to focus on an issue that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, to say nothing of the forcing people to go over the history of, you know, the flag, the anthem, Francis Scott Key. Most of that history is not taught in high school or in college. You'd have to seek it out. And so most people really don't know what they're talking about when they talk about our anthem, which is something everybody assumes that they know everything about. So that's really at the heart of that.
Yeah, but Roland, let me just say this. Beyond that and those all important points, do I have to be black to stand with Black Lives Matter?
Nope.
Do I have to be black to protest and exercise my First Amendment right? I mean, the civil rights movement, the human rights movement is filled with people who don't look like you and me, who helped push forward civil rights, beat back slavery, beat back Jim Crow. The ignorance of this statement is rooted in the fact that he has a right, no matter what color he is, to stand up or rather sit down and do his form of protest in this sports box that I often talk about, that no one believes that you can have a social consciousness because you can throw a ball or shoot a basketball. It makes no sense.
I got to read this for y'all guys. This is very simple. So this is Jackie Robinson, the great Jackie Robinson.
Exactly.
This is what he wrote in his own words. And it's amazing how none of these people want to quote Jackie Robinson, who served in the military, who first black baseball player in Major League Baseball. He said, there I was, the black grandson of a slave, the son of a black sharecropper, part of a historical occasion, a symbolic hero to my people. The air was sparkling, the sunlight was warm, the band struck up the national anthem, the flag billowed in the wind. It should have been a glorious moment for me as the stirring words of the national anthem poured from the stands. Perhaps it was, but then again, perhaps the anthem could be called the theme song for a drama called The Noble Experiment. Today, as I look back on that opening game of my first World Series, I must tell you that it was Mr. Ricky's drama and that I was only a principal actor. As I write this 20 years later, I cannot stand and sing the anthem. I cannot salute the flag. I know that I am a black man in a white world in 1972, in 1947, at my birth in 1919. I know that I never had it made.
Let me tell you, Roland, Colin Kaepernick's only crime was forcing our society and our country to actually live up to the ideals that we profess to love.
Well, I also think that those statements by Jackie Robinson beg for racial reconciliation in this country. Until black people and white people reconcile the historical nature of slavery, of racial oppression, and come to run some reconciliation on it, we're going to continue to struggle with it. It's going to hang over our humanity, hang over our country, and hang over our communities like no other, while we walk by like we want to ignore it. Most African Americans Americans aren't afraid to talk about the race question. Most people that don't look like us are terrified of talking about it, yet there is reconciliation, there's peace, and there's resolution in that conversation. You got to have it, much like when you talk to your therapist.
But the other thing you get with sports, too, is with sports, you get this element, too, of people wanting these players to shut up and entertain them and not really have a personality or an opinion. Because obviously these athletes are paid, very well. There's always this element in the sports media of these guys get paid really well. Why don't they just shut up and play and not worry about anything? As if there's no right on their part to have an opinion.
If Colin Kaepernick said, I'm going to sit down until veterans and wounded warriors are treated as equally and as well as they should be, everybody would be praising him and Chip Kelly would be kissing him.
The whole world would be praising him. The notion that Colin Kaepernick cannot be an oppressed black man in the United States because of the money that he makes is a false notion.
Right.
Or because of his privilege.
We're sitting in the backdrop of the United States Capitol. Just a month ago, Senator Tim Scott, who's a United States Senator, spoke about his experience with the Capitol Police.
Right.
So with the Capitol, as an elected member of the United States Congress, so for the notion that Colin Kaepernick can experience police brutality or mistreatment at the hands of law enforcement because he's well paid or an athlete is a false notion. It's a moot point.
But I tell you what, this whole Vets for Kaepernick is amazing.
Absolutely.
Because Drew Brees ripped him, I support the military, I went on 5 USO tours. Well, Drew, what are you now going to say to the vets, the actual members of the military who are standing for Kaepernick? I think this is a game changer.
And this whole issue of him being anti-American, I think the fact that he's sitting and protesting shows how much he cares about America and how great America is by giving him the First Amendment, which is really what these vets for him are saying. We fought for him to have that right, and we can disagree with the manifestation of that protest.
The idea that it was anti-veteran was nonsense from the beginning.
Absolutely.
He was talking about police brutality, and somehow we did a magic trick into, it's an anti-veteran
because the anthem was the bridge to that, though, allegedly.
And Jason, I got this here. So Kimberly Guilfoyle, whatever her name is on Fox News. So she goes, MLK would have never done this. And I'm going, so why don't you actually go read MLK's speech, I Have a Dream, where he talked about police brutality. He talked about the treatment of African Americans. I'm going, but you conveniently leave those things out.
Or his
that always happens because everybody wants to talk about Martin Luther King or Muhammad Ali whenever it's convenient for them. But I'll say this, and in addition to being happy about veterans from Kaepernick, I've been happy to see some of the athletes stand up for him. I've been happy to see regular people having this conversation. And I promise you that Thursday night, this is going to be the most lit watch preseason game ever because Chip Kelly said he's going to start and everybody's buying Kaepernick jerseys off the rack.
There you go.
Well, Roland, the other thing we have to remember, Martin Luther King spoke out against the Vietnam War. He was unpopular at his time. So was who's the other gentleman that you just mentioned? Muhammad Ali. And he's a world citizen and was revered before his passing earlier this year. And so protest is never convenient at all. But yet, if it brings about change and it is a broad-based stand, we will see Colin Kaepernick in the annals of history as if similar to Muhammad Ali and other athletes who have stood up like John Carlos and Tommy Smith and others.
Let me tell you.
Well, bottom line is this here as we look at this whole story, and that is the people who are criticizing Colin Kaepernick don't want to talk about why he is doing this. They want to only focus on the fact that he is doing this because it is nice and convenient to avoid the reality of what he's talking about, and it forces America to deal with police brutality, to deal with the accountability, to deal with income inequality, to deal with all of these matters, to deal with the education system, and nobody wants to deal with that because, and I'll use Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech before I got to go to break, and that is here. We love to quote content of character. Can we just all get along? Can little white boys and little white girls hold hands? But that was Dr. King's dream. But they don't want to deal with the top 2/3 of the speech, which was the real hard stuff that we still, 53 years later, are still trying to confront.
Kickstart your day at 7 and get the news you need from the perspective you want. NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Every weekday morning at 7 on TV1.